building. My name is Bob Crum, and I'm the Executive Director here of the Hampton Roads Planning District Commission and the Hampton Roads Transportation Planning Organization. And I just want to sincerely welcome everybody to our Regional Transit Advisory Panel meeting. This, of course, is the Wednesday, August 31st public meeting of our Regional Transit Advisory Panel, which from this forward we'll call RTAP for short. For our just as a quick reminder, we are live streaming our meeting today and we'll be posting it up on our website. Maybe just a little bit of background for any new guests or viewers from home before we go around with the introductions. So just a reminder, during the 2020 Virginia General Assembly session, I think our friends at HRT will agree that we had some transformational legislation passed before the General Assembly that at long last provided a dedicated source of funding for public transportation here in the Hampton Roads region. And we're incredibly excited that that funding is going to build an interconnected backbone regional transit system that we call the 757 Express that will be, I keep looking the words Ray, will let me know if I mess any of this up. It will be about 13 bus routes that with a goal of 15-minute service intervals at different bus stops with the amenities and technology that really will start to create the regional backbone for the type of transit system that we've always wanted here in the 757 region. We're really excited about the progress that HRT has made utilizing that money, and I'm just really excited about what that's going to mean to the quality of life of our 757 Hampton Roads region. As part of that process to create that dedicated funding, the General Assembly passed a companion bill or some language that required our transportation planning organization to establish this panel, the Regional Transit Advisory Panel. And if you I have the RTAP's handiwork in front of everybody, but this is your summary of recommendations that you all developed with your work over the about a one-year period. And if you look at the bottom of page 1, you'll see that call-out box that shows what that legislation said, that our RTAP was to bring together a very diverse and comprehensive group of community stakeholders to really have representatives from all the entities that are important to this conversation, ranging from business, industry groups, employers, shopping destinations, institutions of higher education, our military partners, our hospitals, our healthcare center, and public transit entities, to really advance the vision for a multimodal transportation system here in the Hampton Roads region. So if you open up to the centerpiece, you see the list of this membership of the RTAP, and these are, of course, all the people that contributed to this report and to the progress that this RTAP has made. So I just want to pause before we go around for introductions and say, first off, thank you. We made progress at the last General Assembly session. I think this group has been incredibly helpful in increasing advocacy for transit in the Hampton Roads region. I know I've presented to our transit entities that are very, very appreciative of the work of this panel. Before we go any further, what I'd like to do is just go around the table quickly and do some introductions. And there was a sign-in sheet that, okay, there's a sign-in sheet going around. If you could please give your name and organization you represent on the sign-in sheet, but just so everybody knows who's at the table. Pavitra, would you mind getting us started and we'll go around.
Good afternoon. I'm Pavitra Parthasarathi, the Hampton Roads Transportation Planning Organization, HRTPO.
Mike Giardino, Executive Director, Peninsula Airport Commission, Newport News, Williamsburg Airport, the new home of ultra low-cost service to Orlando and Fort Lauderdale on Avelo Airlines. Hello, Avelo. Book now.
Hello, I'm Maurice Person, the Assistant Superintendent for City of Norfolk Waste Management.
I'm Jonathan Mills, Safety Officer for the City of Norfolk Waste Management Division.
I'm Martha McLeese, Virginia Beach Vision Executive Director.
Sarah Jane Kirkland, President and CEO, Pacific Leadership Institute.
Good afternoon. Janet B. Green, CEO of Habitat for Humanity Peninsula and Greater Williamsburg.
Troy Eisenberger, City Traffic Engineer, City of Chesapeake.
Good afternoon, Martino DeStefano, the Virginia Beach Hotel Association. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. Zakia Cunningham, YWCA Southampton Roads, Director of Mission Impacts, and I'm here representing also the Urban League of Hampton Roads.
Good afternoon. I'm Kurt Hoflick. I'm the Division Vice President for Ambulatory Services and Care Healthcare.
Good afternoon. Angela Hopkins, City of Newport News Senior Planner.
Jim Wofford, MacArthur Center.
Noelle Pinker, Hampton Roads Transit. I do government relations.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Christy Lockhart. I'm a management analyst with Hampton Roads Transit.
I'm Rob Case. I work here, and I'm the Chief Transportation Engineer.
Hi, I'm Megan Gribble, and I work for Transportation Planning Division of Planning for Virginia Beach. I'm actually just, Mark Shea is retiring today, if you knew him. So his last day is today, so I'll be the point of contact for anything regarding that from here on out.
My name is Keith Darrow. I'm here representing WHRO's Emerging Leaders Board. However, since joining the panel, I've been promoted to my other job. I am now City Transportation Engineer for the City of Norfolk as well. So double duty today. Thank you.
I'm Steve Jones. I'm the Community Plans Liaisons Officer at Naval Station Norfolk. I'm representing Captain David Dees at Naval Station Norfolk.
Good afternoon, Ed Reed with Two Capitals Consulting. We do governmental relations for the City of Virginia Beach and City of Hampton.
Kate Baker with Two Capitals Consulting, representing City of Virginia Beach.
Good afternoon, Amy Brazell. I'm the Director of Contracted Services and Operational Analytics with HRTPO.
Good afternoon, Ray Amoruso, Chief Planning Development Officer for Hampton Roads Transit.
Good afternoon, Brad Martin. I'm a civil engineer with WPL, formerly on Virginia Beach City Council and currently the chair of the city's Process Improvement Steering Committee.
And good afternoon. I'm Jason Souders, City of Suffolk's Transportation Planning Manager representing Suffolk Transit today.
Hello, I am Chris Nykirk. I'm with Smart Mouth Brewing Company, but representing the Atlantic Avenue Association.
Matthew Harrington. I'm a transportation planner here at the HRTPO.
Good afternoon, Uroš Jovanović, transportation engineer at the HRTPO.
Kathleen Grauberger. I work here at the HRTPO as a transportation planner, and I will respectfully ask that if you miss the attendance sheet going around, it will come back to me. So at the end of the meeting, you can either see me or it will be here on this back table for you to sign in. Thank you.
Good afternoon. I'm Jerry Grimes, and I'm the Joint Base Langley Eustis Community Partnership Manager, and I'm here representing Colonel Hung, our Vice Wing Commander. Good afternoon, Ben Goodall here, Acting Director of Planning and Administration with Williamsburg Area Transit.
Steve Lambert with the City of Virginia Beach Parks and Rec Transportation Planner, formerly working here.
Well, welcome back, Steve. Well, thank you, everybody. Before we go any further, maybe a little bit of chair prerogative, and I'm going to give Matt Klepeyes in the back just sort of the 1-minute warning. I think many of you have seen Joel Rubin's work promoting offshore wind in our community. And I thought that Joel's branding of Wednesday as Wednesday was quite a clever approach to promote sustainability. And obviously, in terms of the offshore wind opportunity for our region, we're incredibly excited about a new sustainable energy source. happening off the coast of Virginia. We're really excited about the wind turbines that are going to be not only off the coast of Virginia, but also in the Northeast and to the Southeast. And honestly, we have the opportunity here in our harbor, in our Hampton Roads region, to be the hub for the supply chain for all of those wind turbines. So we're really excited about not only the sustainability opportunity here, but the job creation opportunities. So if you wouldn't mind, we've been doing a little thing with meetings on Wednesdays, and Matt will need to do a couple of photographs, but really love if everybody could please pick up their fan. First off, take it with you. Joel left us plenty of them. But if you wouldn't mind holding it up and maybe looking towards Matt. Matt's going to do a couple of clicks, but I think some of our offshore wind advocates would love to have this on their Facebook page. I appreciate everybody's patience. Couple more. And Matt, we can't do this without Ms. McClellan having a Wednesday photo. So. All right. Thank you, everybody. Appreciate your patience. And Matthew, thank you. Thank you for doing that for us. Okay, so let's get on to our agenda and business today. First, we have the minutes from our last meeting, which was January 25. Any objections to the minutes as presented? If not, can I just get a motion and a second to accept those as presented, please? We have a motion. Second. No, you know.
I second.
Second. So just a vote for consent. All in favor, please indicate by saying aye. Any opposed? Fantastic. Okay, let's jump into our agenda today. So a couple of the, obviously in your excellent report and all of your recommendations, we've often thought about and talked about the need for transit advocacy here in the Hampton Roads region. And what we talked about is that just for too long, our transit agencies have sort of been at it alone to advocate for funding, advocate for the importance of public transit and what it means to the quality of life in our community. And I think what you've helped build is this network where we're starting to see that advocacy beginning to occur. But I think there's really a hunger for how you take that to the next level, right? So I want to thank Noelle Pinker, because when we talked about this, Noelle said, I think I know the right person, and we're going to bring that person in. So I am really excited to introduce our guest speaker who's going to join us remotely today. I'd like to introduce you to Mr. Arthur Gazzetti. He is the Vice President, Policy and Mobility, Vice President of Policy and Mobility for the American Public Transportation Association. Arthur is a fellow Pennsylvania boy. It's really exciting to have you here today. Go Mansfield University, but I see you're a graduate of Edinburgh, so it was great to see that. So just a little bit about Art. Art is a 41-year professional in public transportation. Sorry, Art. At the local, state, and national levels. He currently serves as Vice President for Policy and Mobility for the American Public Transportation Association, or Apta, which is the trade group for the public transportation industry. A key current focus is integration of transit networks with new and emerging public and private mobility services, including microtransit, transportation network companies, automated vehicles, and bicycles. The public transit agency of the future will weave these services into a system with high-capacity transit lines in key corridors as the backbone. Prior to coming to DC in his current position in June of 1997, Mr. Gazzetti had 16 years of management experience with two of the nation's leading public transportation systems, New Jersey Transit and also the Port Authority of Allegheny County, which I think you all know is near the Pittsburgh metropolitan area. Mr. Gazzetti has a political science degree from Edinburgh State University and a Master of Public Administration degree from the University of Pittsburgh. So, Art, thank you for being with us today. Fingers crossed our technology works for you, but really look forward to hearing from you and learning from you today, Art.
Thank you so much.
I try to help out a little, right?
The extraordinary changes in the transportation financial landscape and the mobility landscape over the past several years. I think that's an important way to talk about our advocacy. And certainly it's a time of opportunity with a lot of good news, but also with some numerous unique challenges. I appreciate the mission and work you are tackling at the Regional Transit Advisory Panel. You already have success to celebrate, and of course we can couple that with some success at the federal level this year. I also want to give a special shout out to Noel Pinkert and to William Harrell of Hampton Roads Transit for the work they do as mobility providers for the region. And I can say that I also appreciate they stay in touch nationally with what's going on, the best practices, innovative service, etc., across the country. And that's one thing that Apta likes to connect people with. We'll go to the next slide. Yeah, this is my organization. This is the roots of it. People, 1882, we go back that far, the American Public Transportation Association. And hey, we're talking about horse-drawn streetcars back then. We're talking about before the internal combustion engine. But, there was a need for a national association. This is no joke. They organized North American Association to deal with the pressing issues of the day, pollution, congestion, and the cost of fuel. And those issues are certainly still around today. But the main point here, and the reason for putting this picture up here, is to just depict the change. I mean, it has been 140 years, but there's been just enormous and continuous change over that period of time. And I'm going to circle back to that theme a little bit later. Next. This picture, I apologize, the data is a little old, but the message is still the same. It's pre-pandemic data. Actually, the pandemic would skew the data, so I'm better to have the old data. But the main point here is it's a federal, state, local partnership. And there's other funds too that, are self-provided locally through through fairs, advertising, etc., real estate. But all the pieces are important. You take any one of these pieces out, and it's going to be trouble. So I'm here to talk about a lot about the federal money, but also to talk about the state and local money. Apta rightfully focuses on federal, but the local activities as well. In fact, Apta's strategic plan says, let's make sure we keep focus on the state and local element. Let's begin. Next. I mentioned the federal success. A year ago, and it was really less than a year ago, the federal program for transit was about $13 billion. It's now $21+ billion. And I'm pleased to say it survived so far the appropriations process. So it's sort of been affirmed by the process. So we are talking about, say, a 70% jump in federal funds. And this is just the money coming to transit directly. You also have unprecedented amounts of multimodal money that you can compete for if your project satisfies the national goals that are identified in the law. Another thing about this bill is it's enough money to make a difference. You know, I've been through a lot of federal bills, and much of the time, you get enough money to barely keep up. But here, it's enough money to hopefully make some transformative changes in the way you're doing things. Next, I would say it's all this combined creates a strategic moment. There's this national focus on infrastructure, unlike any really we've ever seen, because it's been backed with strong actions. But, you know, I mentioned you have a 70% increase in federal funds. That's going to require, you know, say a 70% increase in local match. Is everyone prepared for that? One reason I can't be with you today, I was in Spokane, Washington, to talk to all states. It was a meeting with states and to talk about their part of this federal-state local partnership. And to talk about, you know, the need. They're going to have to match funds. Some are prepared, others aren't. And the more you have, the more you can compete for, because there's a lot of discretionary money. Discretionary funds sort of went away with the MAP 21 law, the federal transportation law. That's when earmarks were taken out, and the word was, well, if we're going to take earmarks out that Congress can provide, then we're going to take away the discretionary money the administration provides. So we were without, it was largely formula for a while, but now earmarks are back and discretionary funds are back, which means that you can, you know, you need to be in a financial position to compete for those funds. Also, I would say there were the 3 federal emergency bills during the height of COVID, just to keep transit running. And thank goodness that they were there, because it was essential, and transit never shut down. It took essential workers to their jobs, kept hospitals working, kept cities functioning. And the feds stepped up pretty quickly on that. I would view that in the lens that buys time to develop sustainable funds. The federal money's largely been for, at least the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act is for capital. The emergency relief funds were for operating as well, but eventually the feds are going to pay for capital, and operating is going to be on your own, right? So you have to prepare for that. Next. Now on coalitions, they come, of course, in many forms. There's business voices. There's community and neighborhood voices. There's people who just want a environmentally sensitive transportation network that's sustainable and is going to help us achieve environmental goals. There's social equity advocates. The public transit cause requires all of those voices to come together. Now, you can reach your network to all of them individually. Now, a lot of time what happens when you have a campaign or an initiative or just even general support, you want to pull from all of those different groups and form your own particular transit coalition. So you can pull from the grass tops, right? All of these organizations that represent the business voice, the environmental voice, the neighborhood voices, and reach the people directly. Enlist them in your campaign as either people who will write that letter, make that phone call, or go online, through the networks, various networks, social media, and speak their voice for your cause. Now, one thing I would say is that you need to appeal to beyond the riders. And one thing I find amazing is the actual transit elections around the country where you have a transit ballot measure. you need usually 50%. In California, you need 2/3, 66%. And we're winning with a remarkable rate. I'll give you some statistics on that later. But to get those wins, you're going to need to appeal to the non-rider, right? But it's possible. I like the phrase that has been used in some of the campaigns. Public transportation, some of us use it, all of us need it. So the types of coalitions you put together need to appeal to the users, yes, but also the non-users who see benefits, and they are there. Again, what could be more representative of the public sentiment than that? Just on there are more ways to raise money than a ballot measure, but I just use that as an example because that is the public speaking through their votes. They want transit, and they're willing to raise their taxes to do it. They're speaking up directly on that. We had a meeting in Austin a few weeks ago to talk specifically about transit elections. And the mayor of Austin, Mayor Steve Adler, was there. Also there with the mayor of Phoenix, Mayor Kate Gallego. And they were proud to stand up for their election. Having a champion, it doesn't have to be an elected official. It can be a business voice. The Tampa election a couple years ago, I know the owner of the hockey team said, hey, we need transit to keep our downtown strong and to get people to our hockey games. When I was in Austin, they opened a new line, and it went directly to a soccer stadium, which was a beautiful stadium. It's a lot of people attend soccer in Austin, and the owner of the soccer team appealed to the crowd, saying, all over the world, people take public transit to go to soccer games. And his vision is he wants to create that, in this case, in Austin as well. And the occasion that night was to open the groundbreaking for a new, very nice stadium on a rail line that goes to a very nice a new station that will connect with the stadium. And those were planned together. They planned the stadium where the transit connectivity would be. Now, one thing I would say also, how does Apta, how can you, a couple other ways get moving on coalition building. One is Apta recognizes that, a lot of times you can raise money in your community, but sometimes just a little bit of support can get that grassroots network energized and stepping up for you. So we do have a little local coalition grant program that we have to help you get started. We also have something called Apta Center for Transportation Excellence. And this is for sort of when you have a campaign, whether it be a direct election or whether it be another type of campaign where you just need to, need to get votes and need to rally the public. Apta has a group of people who know and understand campaigns. Because a lot of times we don't. We're all in the business, at least many of us, campaigns aren't part of our world. That's a separate type of knowledge that we want to know. Also, you have pre-campaign activities. How do you know when you're ready? How do you prepare? How do you get ready to put your best foot forward? What kinds of things do you need to do to get the public ready? How do you know, say through polling, that the public might be ready for your next steps? Next. Just a couple comments on the Apta Center for Transportation Excellence. And I'll just actually read this. It's a suite of campaign guides, messaging materials, direct community support, other resources that can help a transit agency and advocates develop, promote, and win ballot measures, but any type of vote, and help it help outline funding options, plans, analysis, all that goes into that. There are people who are campaign professionals that we have that can are there as needed to help you. Now, let me make another comment. Again, I'm using ballot measures because I think I have data that can tell the story. Next slide. These, and I mentioned and proudly that the federal program is now up to 21 billion a year. A lot of times there's more online in some of these local campaigns, much more. 2016 was an outlier year. It just stands out. But on Monday, November 8th, 2016, voters around the country approved 175 billion multi-year funds for transit. Now, again, that's not all 1 year. Some of those are 30 or 40 years long, but that's part of the benefit of it. You have a revenue stream coming, the certainty that comes with that revenue stream over the years. So no matter what you would do in the finance area, to have that certainty is very valuable. You can plan on a multi-year basis. You can figure out your financing. You can leverage federal money, sometimes private money too, when you have that kind of a funding stream. Now, in 2020, during the pandemic, and I tell you honestly, I was thinking when the pandemic hit, and I know there were transit elections scheduled, I said, I wish you luck under this environment. And lo and behold, no kidding, we count these very carefully and judiciously. 47 to 52 passed. And then in 2021, pandemic still around. All of them passed. There were only 11 that year, so I'll put that in context. But still, all of those 11 was a question to the voters: do you want? So I'd say this to tell the story that it's going very well. A couple of weeks ago in Ann Arbor, Michigan, there was a vote. And I was following the news on that, and it wasn't against transit, but hey, household costs are high. The cost of living is high. There's a lot of hits on household budgets, and the media was saying we need a transit initiative, but now's not a good time. Now's not a good time for it. Let's do it another time. But the backer said, well, there's never a bad time to speak up for transit investments if they're going to help your community grow stronger, improve your economy, help improve opportunity for your public. So they proceeded with the vote and won with over 60% of the vote count. So a great story there. By the way, also, 2022, so far, 15-2. So 15 out of 17 elections won. And by the way, the Ann Arbor vote was significant. It was raising, in this case, it was a property millage. It raised it from 7 mils to 1.68 mils. So it was, quite a action there. Next slide, please. Now this talks about, a lot of the transit elections are for sales tax, but there's many other ways. This just goes to show some of them. And which one's the best? There is no which one that's the best, and which one can get the most support. I was in this trip to Spokane, very exciting conversations with the state of Pennsylvania and the state of Illinois, who were considering, at least Illinois has already done it, a package delivery fee. So, hey, they use the transportation system, right? So that's just an idea. It's whatever fits your community decision-making framework the best. My hometown, Pittsburgh, they had a poured drink, P-O-U-R-E-D. Can you believe it for transit? Next slide, please. And this just goes to some of the other state and local initiative measures that have been passed of all kind, through your state legislature, through your city council, all different kinds of ideas. There's a story that goes with each one of these. That's what makes it interesting, and a context that goes with each one. Happy to talk about those as time might permit. But I would say that local self-help, of all of the funding sources A local self-help multi-year tax is the most dear. Because A, you took the initiative locally to have that base that can help leverage other funds. It can be there for a match. It can be there for whatever use you want. Sometimes the federal monies can't be used for operating, for example. You can use it for whatever you deem locally your needs are. And for all of those reasons. Next slide. Yeah, I just thought I'd talk a little bit about this too. What is the state of transit today? And I'll make a couple comments on that. Here's what transit ridership was historically. And I'll call attention to, oh, by the way, the far to my left, let's see, I'm trying to figure it out, would be maybe to your right, but my left, the early years, those peak years actually were streetcar era. They were so ubiquitous, that's the way people moved. And by the way, that first peak you'll see, anyone want to know what dates those were? And it's interesting because they came right after the pandemic of 1918, 1919. Of course, that was the roaring 20s. Those were peak years for transit ridership. Now, I'm not saying that things are the same now as they were in 1919, but it is a historic fact that the years immediately following the pandemic of 1919 were peak years for transit, robust years for transit use. Then it was a little dip there when the streetcar era started to phase out and the automobile era started to phase in. But then World War II, war years bump up again. And why is that? Because there was a call to a national cost, right? It was a time of war. We wanted to not use oil for transportation. We needed it for other reasons. Hey, maybe that kind of national call can be right sometime in our future. And then, of course, the decline with the age, when all we were doing was investing in automobile travel and stopped investing in other ways. A little bit of a turnaround, but slow. At least the decline stopped, and started to see a mild type of increase. But I think now we do have an opportunity for a new era. Next slide. Here's where I talked about navigating change. And when you think about it, public transit providers and all of society, but I think it is an interesting story. I was tempted to grab a book out of my briefcase to reading about this now, but the transitions over the years from the horse-drawn streetcars that I showed in that earlier photo to electric streetcars. Then, of course, the move to the automobile age. Urban planning was all about facilitating automobile travel. Neighborhoods were designed so really you couldn't go anywhere but to take your car to travel. But then cities did become popular around the 90s, early parts of the 21st century, and there was a rebirth. Then more recently, say the last 5 or 6 years, we saw an evolving mobility ecosystem. So it's okay, there's all kind of new options. Now, I say that's good. We just have to figure out a way to make all of those options blend in a way that they're focused on the goals we want to take them to. But certainly it's good to have mobility options. Next slide. I know I'm starting to go long, so I'm going to be real quick on this next one. But I did want to mention just some of what I see, what are the opportunities and challenges here? One, I mentioned project delivery. And by the way, you're all very well tuned in people. I really was impressed with the introductions as you went around the table. So I'm telling you things you already know, but it'll help maybe put a punctuation mark on a lot of them. One, on project delivery, we have the great benefit of having this Federal Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act. I know in Virginia you're investing also. But hey, we have the challenges of cost escalation, workforce shortage, supply chain issues. So, hey, we're up for it, but we're going to implement that bipartisan infrastructure law, even with these challenges. But project delivery is a big deal, and we're very focused on that and trying to get things right as much as we can. Workforce is hitting all sectors, but it is the number one issue that comes up when you talk to transit systems about what are the issues affecting your operation and service these days. Sometimes it's impacting growth. They want to grow. They want to restore service levels, many transit systems, and they need the workforce to do it. Of course, where will work at home trends land? I don't want to get in, don't want to start there because that's a big discussion, but I certainly think that there's going to be a move beyond the commute trip. It's not about work. It never was about work. So regardless of how the work trends land, there's going to be public transportation trips in whatever form. I was interested, just a quick, again, on my trip I was just on, talking to the transit providers in New Mexico. I'll call them out because they're the ones that made the quote. They're saying, yeah, they're seeing transit ridership is strong on weekends. And so people are happy to ride transit. They just don't want to go to work. It's the commute trips that you see the numbers are dropping. Cybersecurity, needless to say, a big issue. Network redesign. I would say that some would say that the pandemic revealed transit ridership. Now, that's not a baseline to say, okay, we're just going to provide service in the targeted communities, but you can build up from there. You know, that's a core base of riders. Provide service as frequent as you can, as reliable as you can, and serve those strong ridership communities as well as you can, while we provide, of course, coverage and mobility options everywhere. The final thing I'll say is metrics for measuring transit's value. I mean, one comment here. Say you have a work from home household, and they're not going to take transit 5 days a week like maybe they historically did. They're just going to go in for 3 days a week or 2. So say they're going in for 2 days a week. That's only 40% of the ridership when they were going 5 days a week. But does that make the transit trip any less important? You still need to be there when it's needed. Provide that access to jobs, to opportunity, to healthcare, to education, all of the purpose that transit does. So that's part of the way to look at measuring transit's value. Next slide. I thank you for your time and attention. That's me. And I wanted to talk about coalition and advocacy, but I thought it best to do that in the framework of what are the issues we need to address, what is the questions we need to respond to, and amid all of that, how can we galvanize community support for ongoing transit options in our communities and regions. Thank you again.
Thank you, Art. We really appreciate your time today and your briefing. Why don't I open it up to the table and see if there might be some questions that you might have. Ms. McClellan?
I really appreciated the list of ideas for funding. The challenge we have in Virginia is that we're a Dillon state, and unfortunately, with few exceptions, none of those could happen unless we get the approval of the General Assembly. So I think that's one of the challenges that we have here, is that while at a local level, and I can say as a locally elected official from the city of Norfolk, we do our part to fund our local transit authority, we really need the state to step up. And that's what the sort of the genesis of this organization, this dialogue panel is. So it's, you know, it is truly the challenge that we have here on the ground here in Hampton Roads. More of a comment, sorry, not really a question.
It's an excellent comment, and of course, it's not unique to Virginia. There's, for whatever reason, there's right. The eastern states tend to go to their state legislatures. My home state of Pennsylvania is like that. The western states aren't like that. I mean, there's so much more ballot measures, for right or wrong, I don't know, in California, say, than in the eastern states. So it's a matter of culture, it's a matter of state constitution. I don't know if, there's probably some, what I like about your question, there's probably a point there. How might that be changed, and have any states done anything like that?
Yeah, it's the difference between home rule and Dillon rule, and those ballot measure initiatives happen in home rule states, and we have to change the entire General Assembly. So not a big lift.
The other questions, Kyle?
Yes, you mentioned the Apta grants. Is that on a certain schedule or cycle that you all have, or how can we learn more about those grant opportunities?
Yes. Now, again, thank you for that question, because that gives me a spark. Yeah, our budget year started July 1st. So the funds, every year we put it in our budget to do that. So we should get that out now. It should be out already, to be honest with you, because the funds were in our budget beginning July 1st. I'll stay in touch with Noel and others to make sure. It should be very soon.
Brad, did you have a comment?
Thanks, appreciate your presentation. I'm sure every locality you deal with wants to think of themselves as unique. And we, I think, certainly are. We've got 7 cities within a stone's throw of each other. We've got 21 localities, or Bob, is that right? 21 localities? All of our inland waterways and other problems make a gridded system challenging. We always have trouble, whether we're talking about deliveries or public transit with a first mile, last mile situation. Are those logistics unique to Hampton Roads, or is that pretty much boilerplate what you see in all the localities in some flavor that you deal with?
Okay, I'm gonna try to speak to the essence of that and tell me. I'm pausing because I hope I nail it for you. Land use is key, right? I mean, some places are the land use is right, or call it a fixed roof bus. In some places it's not. It comes with land use, community planning, and to some degree density also, but the type of service you have will depend on those kind of things. Mike, you mentioned micro transit. Places that lost ridership during the pandemic because maybe people aren't going to their work destination. Micro transit is something that is happening more and more. Sometimes as a first mile, last mile, sometimes as a point to point. Now it's expensive. You're getting on some of these micro transit systems 4 or 5 people an hour. Wow. Again, mobility is essential. We have to make sure it's a necessary function of government to make sure your community is mobile. But we're figuring those things out. Now, if you can connect that micro transit with the first mile, last mile, say on a trunk line, that is good to do because you are saving costs. So there's a lot of cost analysis here. There's a lot of it has to do with density. I'm going to make a statement here. I was recently in Columbus, Ohio. I know they're just about ready to open a big microchip plant. Good. I mean, that's good for America to have that microchip plant. Where they're locating it, though, you're going to have to drive to get there, right? So location decisions are important for jobs, for affordable housing, for all the things we want to do. Thank you.
So, Art, as we maybe wrap up, I did want to ask one final question before we move on to our next agenda items. That I really appreciated your information, which I'll be honest, I would have never estimated the winning percentage for transit funding and referendums over the past couple of years. What would your advice be for this panel of advocates from the perspective of, for those communities that are winning this conversation, pro-transit, what are they leading with? What are those topics that Hampton, when they put together these advocacy campaigns, I'd be interested in if there's a common thread of their messaging and maybe the sound bites that they're leading with. Really appreciate any advice you could give us on.
No, all great questions. Thank you all. I mentioned that Center for Transportation Excellence, and I would commend them to you. Again, even if your plan is not a ballot measure, because like you say, you need to go through a lot of mother may I type of steps to do something like that. But they understand polling, they understand messaging, they understand how to get the word out through social media, through direct mail, through on advertising, media, all of those things. So, hey, we're public transportation providers, right? I don't know those kinds of things, but I say that campaign knowledge is helpful. That's why Apta has that resource, the resource we provide at no cost to help people, and I would suggest that. But the second answer I'd like to give is when you ask communities about the vision they want for their future, no one wants the future of congested roads with one person in a car just waiting, stacked up, and you can't go anywhere. That's dystopian. That's a dystopian vision. You envision a better future, a future that have vibrant communities, that have street life, that have, and so I'd say appealing to the better visions of their future is part of it too.
Fantastic, Art. Well, again, thank you so much. We have a few more agenda items here and would welcome you to stay on if you can. In the words of Dimitri, I think that will work. Yes, Ms.
I will, and I will stay. You have a great state of Virginia. It's one of the most awesome states in the country, I think. So I'll learn a little bit more about your neck of the woods here. Thank you.
Ms. McClellan, did you have it?
Yeah, Art, from one Commonwealth to another, I wanted to thank you for your presentation. And one of the things that you said really just sparked something for me, which is one of our legislative agendas for the Hampton Roads Planning District Commission is supporting economic development and site readiness. And to your point about the chip plant in Columbus, Ohio, we don't have somebody from the Alliance sitting at this table. And I think that needs to be a big part of what, as we're focusing on that, transit needs to be packaged in to any of those future developments. So I would just ask us to maybe consider how we pull that in. So thank you, Art, for spurring that comment. Thank you.
Thank you, Art. We really appreciate everything you're doing. Again, appreciate having you stay on and listen in on the conversation. Okay, so let's
stay on.
Very good.
Off camera, but stay on.
Very good, sir. Thank you so much. So let's move on to our next agenda item, the Norfolk Naval Base Circulator. One of the really exciting recommendations that came out of this RTAP was an awareness that our naval base is one of our largest employers in the region, but also awareness that if you can get effective transit extended to the gate, now you're dealing with a very large facility that really may not be transit oriented in terms of density, but with the way it's laid out. And one of the things that we talked about is what do you do with arrivals once you get into the gate? And could there be an opportunity for a pilot circulator project on the base? So, Ray, I know you and your team took that to heart, went out and found some pilot funding and have some information to share with us on this today.
Thank you, Bob. You're absolutely correct. The genesis of this was that the subgroup of this larger panel, the Military and Transit Work Group, had put as one of their top items something that actually has been around for a very long time as a desire. The military base is indeed very large, has a lot of people coming from all over the region, even from other states. It has always had the dilemma of how do you fund service on a federal installation the way HRT is structured in terms of how it funds its operation, which, as you all know by now, is that each city determines how much or how little service they'd like to see on an annual basis in the service district. That's a federal installation, and while it resides in the contiguous entity known as the city of Norfolk, it's not part of the city of Norfolk. Um, Captain Dees and thank you, Steve, for being here today, is very progressive-minded commander of the base. Not that we haven't had them in the past, but is a believer in transit and very much felt in this subgroup that this is really critical. I have those points there. It's a large base. The destinations are very spread out, and I used to tease him, what are you talking about? They're all 18 and 21-year-olds. They can all walk everywhere. They're certainly healthy enough, but it's a huge base, and with nodal activity centers are far separated from each other. So there is indeed a circulator that's needed because there's a lot of movement of human capital on the base and daily activity that they have to move from command center to command center. The captain had pointed out that scooters would not be an option. He did not want to see the base strewn with scooters and then become a hazard on the base. But he said, is there a potential, challenge us, is there a potential to identify funding for a pilot program? And lo and behold, sometimes fate is kind of strange. Kudos to Jennifer DeBrew, who now is running the Virginia Department of Rail and Public Transportation, but at the time she was Chief of Planning and Policy. She was an advocate and developed this opportunity through funding through what is known as a TRIP grant, which is Transit Ridership Incentive Program, that had two focuses. They were looking for any transit property in the Commonwealth to submit one of two types of projects. One was improving regional connectivity for urbanized areas, which is a polite way of saying, do you have something that would benefit from money that you can't fund normally that would serve a lot of people in a highly congested area? Or two, one of the trends in transit today, we hear a lot, Art mentioned microtransit, demand responsive transit. There is another fad out there, I'll call it, because transit likes fads. They come and they go. And there's autonomous vehicles a couple of years back. I can go all the way back to the 80s about the fads. The new fad, and I'm not making fun of it, is looking at zero fare or low-income pilot programs. HRT, more specifically, we wrote two grants, one for a low-fare pilot program for school-age children. The other, I put together one knowing that the subcommittee had wanted this, the language that I hope would win grant funding for a dedicated circulator to operate on Naval Station Norfolk to serve the personnel inside of the gate, those 60 to 70,000 people that come there every day. And guess what? We were successful. VDRPT awarded us funding for a 3-year period, and the matching requirements change over the 3 years. It starts out at 80-20, 80% state, 20% local. Changes in year 2, 60-40, 60 state, 40 local. Year 3, 30% state and 70% local. Year 4, the expectation is, so long as it's successful, to continue it with 100% local funding. Our local funding is coming not from any one city, but instead from the generosity of the program that was approved by the General Assembly, the Hampton Roads Regional Transportation Fund. This circulator is actually an extension of one of the 13 regional backbone routes throughout 21 that operates on Little Creek Road. It used to go into the base. So instead, the circulator will provide that function. And as long as the ridership materializes, and that is key, we intend to continue funding that 100% beyond the first 3 years. So I have a partner here. I'm going to introduce her. It's Amy Brazel, who is going to be the project manager managing the contractor that we're about to award a contract to operate this for the next 3 years. So Amy, you can take it from here.
All right, good afternoon again. Let me introduce you to the Naval Station Norfolk Circulator. We did coordinate with the Naval Station Norfolk. Mr. Jones and Captain Dees were very instrumental in creating two routes, the blue route and the gold route. Go Navy. This will be a turnkey operation with HRT managing this contract. This service is going to be free to everyone who uses it. This will connect HRT fixed route system to the Naval Exchange. The operating days and hours, the blue route is going to run Monday through Friday, 6 a.m. to 6 p.m. The blue route is the one that runs internal inside the base. The gold route is the one that will come outside of the base and connect inside to the NEX. That one will operate Monday through Friday, 6 a.m. to 6 p.m. and Saturday, 9 to 6. We will have performance metrics. I'm not going to go through all of them, but we will have requirements such as on-time performance, ridership, and customer complaint data that is required of our contractor. So last Thursday, our board awarded a contract to James River Transportation to operate the service. We've given them a 90-day notice to proceed. We anticipate the service starting around December the 1st. Our planning and marketing efforts are currently underway where they did create a design of what the vans will look like. It will be a cutaway type vehicle, as you see pictured there. That's what they're going to look like. And we're working with James River at this point to launch the project.
We kept it kind of short, but I'm sure you all have questions. Compliments to the United States Navy and the personnel. They've been great partners. We've been on the base with them. The captain literally, and Captain Days, his XO, literally rolled up their sleeves in one working meeting to help structure the route structure, select the stops, identify for us the activity centers on the base. We originally, if we go back to the map, had oops, one too many. The blue line actually went further to the east and trying to be a taskmaster to all. The captain educated us a bit and said, it's too much. It's a nice desire, but we know where the key activity centers are. And in order to maintain that circulation pattern and within the 15-minute end-to-end trip on the base, let's pull that back. Obviously, going along Carrier Row, you can see there along the waterfront is key. And then we touch a couple of the command centers. It was his idea also to provide a connection. The blue is entirely within the physical footprint of the base. The gold line provides a connection to the NEX, the Naval Exchange, which is a big activity center that also opens the world of HRT, because that's where the MAX service comes in and the Route 21. So folks that need to go elsewhere off of the base can continue on. It also allows the Navy to feel much more comfortable in terms of secured personnel who are using the system on the base by having a dedicated blue route. They helped us structure the sequence of the number of hours to service and the days of the week. So they've been really great partners, and I appreciated that. So we're really excited to start it, and James River Transportation, from what they've showcased for us in their oral interviews, seems to be just the right company to do this. So questions that Amy and I can answer for you.
First off, congratulations to HRT for securing that money. RTAP, Pavitra, we'll have to leave that open since it's a public meeting. Okay, thanks. RTAP members, thank you for your work. I mean, ideas can come to reality, and I think it's just a great example where you can really make an influence. Before we ask for questions, maybe anything from our military partners, anything to add? I sat on that, helped support that military work group, and our military representatives were fantastic. So I really appreciate all that collaboration.
I'll just say that Captain Dees and Captain Days have been both supportive of this. It's been a collaborative effort. HRT has been working at this for years, and so we appreciate that effort, and we're excited to get it started and prove the concept.
Very good. Any questions from our RTAP membership?
So one question, how did we overcome the potential security exposure with the route coming off the base?
So that's why we have the gold line, which makes a connection to the blue line at the NEX. Those individuals that are going to board the vehicles at the NEX are going to be credentialed personnel that have military IDs. Those that are using the gold line, which touch peripheral areas around the base, are going to be regular civilians or potentially military customers. So that's the difference.
And also, in addition to that, the vendor will be vetted and will be able to have base access as well.
Just curious what the cost of the program is and how many people you anticipate using it on a daily basis.
Sure. That's a good question. The total grant from the state, we're gonna have to remember this, is over the 3-year period is nearly $4 million, and then HRTF's percentage changes from year to year depending on the matching requirements. I can get that information. I don't want to put out a wrong number. So Pavitra, if I send it to you, you can get it out to the members. I'll give it to you year by year, the breakdown. What was the second part of the question? Oh, that's a good question, and one we've debated internally and had a discussion with the Navy. To be successful, we'd like to see on each trip, if they're circulating every 15 minutes, between 4 and 6 people using the circulators. We really don't have empirical data yet to support that. I think part of our marketing campaign, and we'll be working with our traffics group because I have an on-base military liaison that's there 7 days a week, is to make sure that we let the personnel know that this is going to be available, where they can pick it up, what the vehicles look like, where the bus stops are. We'll have information in the flagship and flagship newspaper, that's the right one, and at the commissary and other key activity areas so that people know of the service. We can report to this group how ridership is going.
And Ray, just to stress, these are the smaller buses, right?
They're the cutaways that Amy, like that. Body on chassis, 12, 15 maybe passengers at most. They're not full-size buses.
Can you talk a little bit about, I mean, one of the things that the military work group talked about is just some of the logistics of, maybe I arrive at the front gate in a bus, right? And now you have to I have to get through the gates. So will the circulator come outside the gate and pick me? Will the clearance happen before I get in the circulator or after? I'm sure you've given a lot of thought to that.
So NEX is the exchange point, the naval exchange from our system to the gold line, or yellow line, the yellow gold line, navy blue and gold, right? Yeah, that's why we originally had green and blue, and the captain wrote, said, hey, Navy's blue and gold, let's make it the blue and gold. So the gold line will make it at the gate connection, and the operators of the blue line will be checking credentials for those people that are authorized to be on the base. So that's how it will occur. Otherwise, civilians will have to stay in the gold line and go back to NEX.
Any other questions? Ms. McClellan?
Thanks, Bob. So if we're doing about 600 people a day, that's about 1% of the people on the base. Is there, I certainly hope we get there, but is there an ability to expand if we see more? Number one. Number two is, Bob, we sit in a lot of meetings recently. I don't know which one of those, but Harumfa was talking about DOD funding and match funding. Is there an ability to actually draw down some support from DOD for this? Because right now what I'm hearing is you're getting state and local or regional funding for this, but we're not getting any funding from the DOD. Is that correct? And
absolutely correct.
Is there a reason why we couldn't?
And I'll look for help here from Steve, but there is no program the Department of Defense right now has for transportation options, public transportation options on the military installations. Captain Dees has shared with me more than once. Our money goes to the ships, not to the land side transportation issues. Am I correct on that?
Do have the program where the individuals can do the max routes and some of the other routes, and they get reimbursed for that. And that's a civilian-based aspect, or individual persons that get that, and they get a debit card in that regards. And that's a program they can apply for, but that pays for the fee, that pays for the pass in that regards. But the bulk funding, I'm not aware of anything of that nature.
So can I make a recommendation that one of the charges, which I think this organization, as a regional organization, is really charged with thinking about things at a state level. But if we added the federal component to advocate with our federal elected officials for this, recognizing we have the largest concentration of military and federal assets in the country here in Hampton Roads, the ability to apply these DoD resources on these bases, not only Naval Station Norfolk, that might be something that we would be an appropriate extension of this charter.
Yes, and I think that the opportunity would maybe fall in, three thoughts come to mind. First off, I think the value of HRT getting this pilot is proof of concept. And if proof of concept, if we can show that it works and it's successful, Ms. McClellan, to your point, there's two programs that are really receiving more and more attention now from Congress. Defense Community Access Roads Program, the Defense Community Infrastructure Program. DSIP, there might be a connection to, Ms. McClellan, to your point, Defense Community Access Roads, by virtue of the name, would have some work to do to get other modes of transportation considered. But it might be something we might want to be advocating for at the federal level as HRT offers proof of concept through the pilot. And one of the things they have to do is get more money in those programs, but secondly, flexibility for alternate transportation modes. So I think that's an excellent point. Other questions? Yeah.
Thanks, Bob. I've twice put in for a grant, a raise grant, federal grant, to go from airport to the new Amtrak station that's going on at Bland Boulevard, being built and planned. With respect to this, that has to do with a lot of things, including sustainable fuels. But let me just say, this is 34 years too late for me, because I did used to have to give up my parking spot at the Squadron and drive to Subway, and I could have used it back then. But was there a requirement at all for natural gas, electric, or type of fuel that's going to go in this bus?
The grant did not stipulate any special fuel system. It was about solving regional congestion problems and going to points of significant employment, or looking at a pilot program for low to no fare or something similar to that. Those are the only two. Now, this year, the TRIP grant has a couple of other priority areas, and I'm looking to Noel, and I can't seem to remember what those priority areas for this year's TRIP grant applications, because it's an annual mid-year grant application. And it still has a low no fare, but it's something different. It's not congestion this time. You recall?
There was legislation during the last General Assembly session to increase both the low and no fare portion of the program, and the regional connectivity, it's a lower rate. Is that what you're speaking to?
Yeah, I think there's another type of project they're looking for now. I'll have to go look it up. I do know statewide, there were only 4 regional connectivity projects and nearly 30 low to no low projects. So it's that fad thing. It's the cool thing to do now, but maybe we were lucky because our odds were lower.
Other questions? All right, well, HRT, thank you. Thank you both. And looking forward to progress updates as we move forward. Very much appreciated. So let's move on to our next agenda item. One of the things, again, an RTAP recommendation was excitement now that we know where these regional backbone routes will be. Excitement about having bus stops with amenities and frequent service. But as we all know, as bus riders, we begin as walkers, we begin as bikers. And we were really interested, now that we know where these backbone routes are going to be, to start assessing what the walkability and the connectivity look like for pedestrians and bicyclists around these bus stops. So Rob Case came up with a proposal for our work program, which is incorporated. We're going to let Rob, Dr. Case is going to lead us in that overview today. So Rob?
Yeah, thank you, Bob. So today I'm going to talk about our plans for looking at the environment around some of the bus stops on this 757 Express that you've been hearing about. So we're going to talk about how did this happen, And then what do we plan to do? So how did it happen? Well, Bob mentioned your recommendations, and two of these are pertinent to the work here. One is you were interested in the development around bus stops, and then two, you were interested in park and ride lots, and were they, are they there? Are they close to any of these stops? And so that's where we start from. And then, as Bob mentioned, we put it in our work program to assess the environs of these bus stops to identify ways which the localities and transit agencies can improve the infrastructure that supports the bus network. And we'll talk about this more, but Art with Apta was talking about the land use, so that you get on the bus in one spot and you get off it on another spot. But what about that last mile, as they say? What about how you get to the stop and how you get from the stop? So that's what we're looking at. So 3 steps: coordination, doing the audits and making some recommendations, and then implementing. So I'll go into a little bit of detail about all 3 of those. First, coordination. We've discussed this with Ray and his people, and he's on board. And then we've also discussed with Newport News and Hampton, because we intend the first 3 of these routes, as you will see, will be in Newport News and Hampton. And so it's important to work with them, and then to gather their plans for those environments. And so too, the audit and the recommendations, we're going to select some key stops, and I'm going to talk to you more about that in a minute, and get your input on that. And then we need to understand what are the best practices for an environment of a bus stop. We have an idea of that already, and that's what's listed in the next section, A through F there. These are the kind of things we'll be looking for within, say, a half mile of the stop. Again, the park and ride lots that you mentioned, are there opportunities to provide some denser housing around there? Are the stops accessible with sidewalks, handicap ramps? What about multi-use paths in the vicinity? And also was mentioned already, microtransit connections. So on the right there, it's hard to see, but I have a red circle around the stop near where I live. And so just, this is not one of the stops, of course, but look at that. That's technology for you. Look at that. We can try to find my house, I guess. But anyway, so you can see there's some commercial activity around there. You can't see close enough to see the sidewalks in the street. But that's the kind of thing that we'll be looking for.
Rob, if I could just, I apologize for interrupting, but I have to give a shout out. So the guy in the back of the room smiling is Dimitri, who, when he came to me with this pointer idea that, Bob, when you point it up there, it enlarges it and shows on both screens. I have to admit, I said, well, that will never be useful. And now it's our best new toy in the building. So anyway, Dimitri, I give you props. Go ahead, Rob. I'm sorry about that.
Okay. So that's our second and main step in preparing recommendations. And then, but before I get to step 3, let's talk about which stops we would look at. We're thinking we'll look at about 9 stops, 3 for each of the 3 routes there on the peninsula. If you see on the map there, you've got this long route that goes down Jefferson Avenue. And then you've got 2 routes that go between Hampton and downtown Newport News. And those are your first 3 757 express routes, shorter time between when the bus comes. Thank you. Shorter headways, what they call headways. And, you know, and I should say, improvements to the station, to the stops themselves with shelters and that sort of thing is included in the money that's part of this. So we're not going to focus on that so much. We're going to focus on these other things in that quarter mile. But I need your help in thinking about which stops we would focus on, which 9 stops. So do you think it'd be those that are most used? Or would you think those around key activity centers? Because you have, you know, of course you have the shipyard, and then you have the town center in Newport News, and you have the Peninsula Town Center in Hampton. You could look at it from a safety point of view, because we're talking about how do you cross the street. You could look for where the most pedestrian crashes are, or you could look for a diversity of land use, urban, commercial, and residential. You could jump ahead to funding and think about adopt a stop. So are there businesses that are interested? Or there might be something else. So I just want to open it up to the group here for your input on how we might pick those 9 stops.
So any input or suggestions for Rob and his team?
Rob, I can offer to you passenger boarding activities at the stops.
Sure,
On these
yeah.
routes. Obviously, something like Patrick Henry Mall, where a bunch of routes come together, is not quite the same as a bus stop on Jefferson Avenue, but we have boarding activities, and it's not current because of the pandemic, but I can offer you boarding activity at the stop level from 2018, 2019.
Right,
I know that'll be helpful.
right.
Mike, from the airport's perspective, any thoughts?
Well, of course, Bland Boulevard is perfect because the train station is on Bland, the airport is on Bland. And did I say we were getting a Velo Airlines $29 to Orlando? 49 to Fort Lauderdale? Thank you.
Other thoughts or input?
Yeah, I love the idea of when you talked about the pedestrian crashes and safety. I think that's a high point there, and I don't know what those rates would look like. I'd be interested to see what those rates are, if they really are high compared to pedestrian versus, I guess, automobile crashes. But I think thinking of walker rider safety is key.
Okay, thank you very much.
Yes, please.
I think you should definitely go after or solicit businesses to adopt a stop, because you know it's great that we look at high areas of traffic, but you want to try and accommodate as many people as possible. Even though Jefferson Avenue, as said Mr. Adams, may not be as busy, I think it should still be a pleasant experience. So by reaching out to businesses and different entities to adopt a stop in whatever way, small advertisement sponsored by HRT or sponsored by whoever, I think you want to try and maximize your effort at each stop. I think so that would be pretty advantageous to try and go to adopt a stop.
Thank you. Any ideas for what those businesses might be?
I have a question. So what is the goal of the audit? I'm trying to understand, I understand that.
Okay.
So you're to collect this information
Right.
and then provide recommendations. That might help.
Yes, okay,
advise.
so to see, in other words, what is missing? So are there sidewalks missing? Do you need help with crossing the street? Are there development opportunities to get the housing there that would support? Because as you know, transportation is a system, so you can throw these buses out there. It's like Ray with his circulator at the base. Well, that loop is part of it. The rest of it is what does the base look like? And so same thing here. We're throwing out these 3 red lines here, but can people get to and from the red line? And or do they live anywhere near the red line? And so the recommendations would be to build some of the pedestrian infrastructure and or that there be, development, maybe rezonings or whatever is necessary for development along the route. So those are that's the point of it. And along those lines, this is called a pilot. So in other words, we can sort of see how this works. And then it could be expanded because I don't know, Ray, you've probably got 100 stops at least on those 3 routes, I would think.
So with that in mind, are you working with the planning department in Newport News?
Yes.
They would be the ones.
In fact, she's sitting right here.
Perfect. Yay. So yeah, I mean, I would think I don't know Newport News. So, it sounds like you're actually looking for the areas that are probably less developed currently
Good.
than those that
You
are
could, yeah.
currently developed, because
Uh-huh.
those are going to be the ones with less resources, I would assume.
Good.
But
yeah.
I know rezoning and it's not only planning, but it's also public works. I don't know how they do it in Newport News, but those are the sorts of things. If that's the goal, then that seems like that might be a good place to start.
I talked with Rob on Monday about this. It's going to be interesting because the one thing about Newport News is we're over 90% developed, and where these routes are on Jefferson is pretty much all developed with very small vacant lots. So we would have to see at what angle the committee would want to look at. We've identified a lot of the stops along Jefferson through the RTS, and we've already identified them for passenger amenities. One of the things that we're challenged with in Newport News, because we're so developed and we're so old, we have very limited right of way to put a lot of this infrastructure in.
If I may add to what Angela said, and Rob, to help you out. So the Facilities and Engineering Group for each route on the RTS program has been working with the cities to identify where passenger shelters could be put, and in lieu of that, because of the limited public right of way, because we're not going to be buying private property, is benches or some other kind of amenity. I think the biggest help we can get is maybe not so much in Newport News, more so in Hampton, and later when you come to the south side. Sidewalk infrastructure, there are gaps. We need for a standard full-size shelter, a 10 by 12 pad.
Mm-hmm.
And then that accommodates the shelter, the lighting, the wheelchair accessible space inside the benches. But oftentimes we find the sidewalk, you have this beautiful concrete pad, maybe a little bit of extra concrete, and then there's no sidewalk that takes you to the corner so a pedestrian can cross safely. Not so much in Newport News, much more so in suburban parts of Virginia Beach, suburban parts of Chesapeake, where older parts of Norfolk, I think of Princess Anne, the Route 23. Once you get past Ballantyne going east to Military Highway, it's gravel and ditches and not much else, yet you have highly used, right by that Piggly Wiggly, you have highly used bus stop locations. So sidewalk infrastructure is needed. Now, HRT is not in the business of constructing miles of sidewalk.
Exactly.
That falls to jurisdiction. And I could name the same thing, but I'm not picking it off like a Chesapeake anywhere.
No, that's
So-
why I was saying that it's not just planning, but it's public works.
Yes.
What I would think would be the departments to include along that.
And the opportunity that we have is, there's been some great work done in many areas. Let's use our elementary schools, right? You hear about PTAs going out and doing walkability audits. And that's set them up for funding through the Safe Routes to School program, right? The good news is some of these things that Ray mentioned, which I love everything Ray said, filling sidewalk gaps, aligning curb cuts for accessible ramps so that they are usable, moving the crosswalks to the safest point of travel lanes. In some cases, even providing that, or pedestrian crossings are not a lot of money in the grand scheme of things. So what we start to get excited about and the work that Rob's laying out for you is if we can come up with some of these ideas, there is funding, some through the TPO, some through state funding sources, et cetera, that you could start to make a difference and connect some of these opportunities for funding, in addition to informing local governments of what they can do through their CIPs and other things. So So I think you can have a pretty significant impact. Yes, Brad?
All of these funding sources are wonderful, but one other alternative, and I hope I'm not throwing any of my clients under the bus here, but to lean on the developer community. You mentioned you have a 90% developed scenario. When you have a redevelopment project, that's where some of these improvements, connecting sidewalks, upgrading public transit infrastructure can come from. And I'm sorry not to call out a non-success story in Newport News, but we've got a self-storage client getting ready to start construction over there now. And we went through the conditional use permit process, and they've got a bus stop. I call it a bus stop. It's a beautiful pad of concrete right in front of their parcel. And they offered to the city to upgrade those facilities because that nobody's going to use the bus to deliver their couch to their self-storage unit. But they offered to upgrade that facility, and they were told, sorry, there's no mechanism for that. We can't allow you to do that as a private developer to upgrade public transit facilities. So there needs to be some communication there, I think.
And Brad, you've long been an advocate for those public-private partnerships or park and ride. You've expressed that here a number of times, and some of those opportunities.
I would also suggest the pedestrian leading signalization needs to be included, because getting from one side of that busy highway to another, I'm thinking about Vision Zero. To me, that's really where, if I would prioritize, I would think about pedestrian safety as a leading contender. And Norfolk, one of our development projects in Ocean View, we had it was proffered to put in money towards a flashing light pedestrian intersection across Ocean View Avenue. So I don't know how you do it in Newport News. This is what we figured it out in Norfolk for at least that one project. But I think that's an excellent piece of suggestions.
And if I may add one more thing, Rob, as you're doing the audit and discovery, we can help through the traffics program. There's a dearth of park and ride opportunities that we wish we had. And we oftentimes try to partner with the big box stores along the primary arteries like Jefferson and Mercury for some park and ride spaces on the outlying side of their lot that happens to be contiguous to a bus stop. We have a really difficult times because they're all large corporate national, they don't have a local presence per se to make that kind of decision. But if we can get help from the business community to talk to somebody to help us identify partnerships, there's definitely a need for additional park and rides that we can have a few spaces set aside. It doesn't have to be a lot, because the park and rides that we have in our facilities today are mostly through VDOT facilities or the light rail park and rides, but we don't have many park and rides, especially when you get to the fringes of the service district. When you get up to Denby, when you get down in Chesapeake by the town center and even beyond to the Cedar Grove, when you get out on Princess Anne over by that Home Depot and that whole complex by the new hospital, having some parking ride locations that people can drive there and then take transit in would be great. So anything that helps with that, identifying locations, great.
I just had a quick question. Does your audit also involve lighting along paths? Is that outside of your scope?
No, it's not outside the scope. Thank you for that. That's good. That's a good point that I didn't think about. Okay, so quickly, then the last thing, and we already jumped to this a little bit, is the funding. Newport News, of course, possibility for money from the cities and or HRT. We have some money here that is called CMAQ and RSTP. And then we already mentioned the Adopt to Stop. Yes.
Couldn't you use TAP when we're starting to talk about the sidewalk connections too?
Imagine you could, yes. There are lots of, it's a good point. There are lots of funding sources. Thank you.
Rob, if I may, I'd like to throw out a request to our RTAP memberships in a second. So this is a bit of a pilot, as Rob said. We're starting on the peninsula, right? Because that's where the first backbone routes are going to be. but following along some of Brad's comments that he's consistently made as an RTAP member, that opportunity for public-private partnerships. As RTAP members, if you see any stops in your localities and you come up with an idea of who might be that private partner, that private sector partner, please don't hesitate to share it with me, because what we might be able to do is, and our chamber membership's not here today, but they're actively involved here and talked about helping us in that regard. But one rule for RTAP might be to, appoint a subgroup of 4 or 5 people, and maybe we could go and do some outreach with, those private sector entities. Sarah Jane, I know you've often talked about, how your membership group can lean in on these type of things. So if you come up with any ideas like that, please let us know, because maybe, maybe through conversation and some outreach by this RTAP. So I'll be honest, up in Richmond, you drive down Broad Street, right? The Virginia Children's Museum, the Virginia Science Museum, Virginia Commonwealth University, Capital One adopted a bus stop, CarMax. I could go on and on and on, but there's models for this, and maybe it's just a conversation we need to start, that could lead to something. So, Rob, back to you on any other input you might need.
Thank you, Bob. No, that's all I got.
All right. Anything else? Any other thoughts? Okay, so let's thank you for your patience. Let's move quickly to item number 6, which is the upcoming, can you believe we're talking about this, the 2023 General Assembly session, Noel? Seems like we just finished up, right? So just to sort of set the context for this, again, back to recommendations from this RTAP, one of your recommendations was to hold the first ever Hampton Roads Transit Advocacy Day in Richmond at the Virginia General Assembly. And you all work with Susan Gaston and Noel and others. And on February the 3rd, during the General Assembly session, a group of RTAP members joined by Ms. McClellan and other transit advocates went to the General Assembly. We met up there pretty early that morning at 7 a.m. and started posting on Facebook, and addressed the Hampton Roads Caucus that morning virtually, and then proceeded to meet as an RTAP group with 10 General Assembly members individually, where you all had the opportunity to convey the importance of transit to our community and to our quality of life and to our economic potential as a region. Was really excited about that. We were fortunate that even the director of the Virginia Transit Association joined us, and then from there we made our way up to the Capitol, and our RTAP members were actually introduced on the floor of the Senate and introduced on the floor of the House. So, I think it was a great start for us. Obviously, we want to continue to learn and grow. So. After I asked Noelle to sort of give her perspective of what the lay of the land might be as we head into General Assembly session, after I call on Noelle, what I want to ask of the RTAP is, do we want to have another Transit Advocacy Day this year? Because as you know, the planning, the work that went up to prepare for that, we need to get started early. So keep that in mind. But Noelle, any lay of the land for our region and public transit as we look ahead to the session that will start in January?
Sure, as you said, it's creeping up fast. It's going to be the first week of January before we know it. Typically, at this point in the summer, HRT has a more developed legislative agenda. Unfortunately, we work very closely with VTA. That's not unfortunate, but their legislative committee is not meeting until mid-September. So I have 2 items that I know for sure will be in our package. There's other issues that will probably come forth mid-September. The process for HRT is that the draft legislative agenda is considered by our External Legislative Affairs Committee in September. That's going to be on the 21st. And then the full Transportation District Commission will consider it in October. But for right now, first and foremost, we want to preserve and protect the Hampton Roads Regional Trust Transit Fund. That's our primary goal, is to make sure that we remain whole. As you are all aware, we had some attacks last year that we were able to overcome. There was an effort to take away the recordation tax that goes into the transportation trust fund, the transit trust fund, and we were able to overcome that. But we don't know. As of now, there's no bills that have been introduced that would go after that again. But you never know until the last day of filing. So we want to protect that. And then we really want to focus with the entire Commonwealth on electrification or non-diesel delivery of transit services. So we attempted last year, VTA attempted, and we supported their effort to get a transit transition fund established that would support the transition of transit fleets to zero emission fleets. So that's something we're going to go after. That's really in line with the IIJA that Art was discussing. A lot of those federal monies that are coming forth from that are for non-diesel technology. So those are the two things, and I will have more information to present in a couple of weeks.
Very good. So as a reminder, the funding, just so everybody has this information, Ms. McClellan, I anticipate you might have a comment after I give this intro, but as a reminder, our Hampton Roads Regional Transit Fund comes from two sources, right? One is $20 million off the top of the statewide recordation tax. That's a statewide fund. We're getting 20 million off the top. The other is a transit occupancy tax for our region, which is basically 1% in the hotel tax. Go ahead.
The real estate transaction.
And the real estate transaction. Thank you, Ray. The one that is that we really received some concern about last year was that statewide recordation tax, because you have counties across the Commonwealth. Well, actually, anybody outside of Hampton Roads was quite concerned that we were getting that money off the top. Keep in mind that Northern Virginia has done that for some time. Okay. But having said that, Ms. McLeod, I know the other day you were mentioning that we might want to be thinking about is there a way, well, we might be playing defense this year, but eventually should we be looking for that money to come from the general transportation fund at the state level. So anyway, that just wanted to put that out there as a conversation.
Yeah, but just as reference, so the recordation tax goes back to those municipalities, and they're losing money that they typically would have gotten otherwise. And then now they blame Hampton Roads and HRT, and there's a lot of those legislators from those other municipalities who are fighting this. So Northern Virginia used to get it from recordation tax. They have moved to the Commonwealth Transportation Fund in 2020. And so we similarly need to make that move. So at what point, whether it's this year or next, I don't know, but if and until we do, we're gonna have this battle every year. And if that $20 million was successfully taken away, that would devastate, and I can't say this enough, devastate all of the work that HRT and what this organization has done for these regional backbone routes. It's incomprehensible. So it really needs to be, and for that reason alone, if this organization could agree to a transit advocacy day, anticipating that, I think we really should.
One item before ask Noel for more.
I just wanted to agree on the Transportation Advocacy Day. It was such a big win for transit last year to have such support in Richmond, and I would encourage this organization to do that again this year.
The one thing I do want to bring up, and as you know, when you go through General Assembly session, things move fast. And back in 2020, some things played out really quickly, right? And, I know there's always this conversation about, is there regional cooperation in Hampton Roads? You all know me, I'm the regional guy. Yes, yes, and yes. I can tell you about that for hours, right? But I'd like to give you one real example. So when the funding came from the statewide recordation tax, all the counties in our region lost money. That money from rural counties went to this regional transit fund. William and I very quickly, immediately, scheduled a meeting with all the CAOs in those counties. And it was really, it was a great meeting. Obviously concerned about losing that revenue, but at the end of the day, our rural localities said, this is not what we need. We never want to lose revenue and it's going to hurt. But they said, you know what, for our region, HRT needs this. And they were willing to support, right? And I know William and I very much appreciated that. And, I think, our region really got behind this. And Noel, I think it was heartening to see so many different type of people advocating for transit. So Susan Gaston, was a huge help last year, but I just wanted to, like we've heard two already say, yes, we should look towards a Transit Advocacy Day. I just want to, Ed, I know, you live this world, and I'd really be interested in your perspective.
Yeah, thanks, Bob. I actually attended last year, and I thought it was a great opportunity for the region to kind of come together. And I know, having talked to legislators after the visit, they appreciated the time as well. So I would concur that it would be a great idea to do again. And I also think it would be great, to Councilwoman McClellan's point, in anticipation of what may come. It would be just good to be there and be an advocate.
Any other thoughts? Let me ask this, other partners we could bring to the table. We have the RTAP, but are there other partners to think about partnering with for that Advocacy Day? And Ed, I don't know if any come to mind from you. I mean, obviously having Lisa Guthrie and Virginia Transit there last year was important, but I just wonder if there's others.
I did want to note that VTA is going to be doing an in-person transit day this year, so we should coordinate with them if we do decide to go. They do a legislative reception in the evening as well, so it'd be a nice partnership.
Excellent. Yes.
Bob, the BBHA does an advocacy day for tourism, as well as the VTRLA, the Restaurant and Lodging Association. They both do at different times. We tried to combine it a couple times. We try to stay front and center on our industry for tourism. I think the RTAP, and you definitely need to do this every year, because every year is going to be a challenge. So from getting up there and showing face, it needs to be a yearly event. I just think you put it on the calendar, whether there's a major issue on the ballot or not, you still want to keep transportation front and center in the eyes of the General Assembly every year.
So Bob, I would just say, rather than necessarily bringing others along to that Transit Advocacy Day, making sure that we are getting on the other legislative agendas for the tourism, hospitality community, for the Alliance, for the Chamber, so that while they're up for the environmental groups, because transit's obviously something that they would advocate for. So rather than having them necessarily join us, making sure it's on their legislative agendas as they're talking through these issues.
Very good. Mayor Glover, I know for your city, this is an important issue. And any thoughts in terms of advocacy during General Assembly? Oops, I'm sorry.
Yes, those are the folks that are going to be impacted, I think, the most. So we do have some challenges, and so I would confer with folks in our city to certainly join in this effort, because I think when you bring people who really are impacted by it, many of us don't use public transit in this room to the degree that our grassroots and our citizens do. So yes, I would say we can get with our local groups that work in the community to get some representatives to join us in this effort.
Yes, sir.
I agree with Mayor Gulver, because with the tourism industry, when they were talking about changing taxes to minimum wage and taxing tip wage, we actually brought servers, bartenders in the industry to speak how that tax or non-tax would affect them. So that's a great idea, Mayor. Appreciate it.
So I'd like to throw another, oh, yes, Ed,
Yeah,
please.
just two quick things. And so to piggyback on what Councilwoman McClellan said, also the locality legislative agendas, as the localities will begin to, decide what they're putting in their packages between September and November is usually the timeline. It would be great if we could have, any information from this body communicated to the localities. And then secondly, the Hampton Roads Caucus will likely meet again before January. It'd be great if this could be an agenda item potentially to get in front of that delegation as well.
I'd like to bring one more item up maybe in terms of an advocacy. So, I think there's advocacies. So first off, let me close the chapter on this. What I hear is yes and yes, right? Let's let's get ready and have another advocacy day and keep that momentum going. Ray, I'm gonna I should have given you a heads up on this, but it just sort of occurred to me, right? So we have advocacy to do at the General Assembly, but it seems to me we have advocacy to do within our own region a little bit too, right? And I'm not certain what these logistics look like, Ray, but I wonder if we couldn't create a little bit of energy. And Matt, thinking about press releases on this, right, and bringing the media into the fold on this. But what if the RTAP, Ray, got on the public transit system? And, we almost conducted a different type of meeting on that system, right? To sort of bring attention to transit here in our very own region. Any reactions to that? Or Ray, I'm sorry, I was sitting here listening to it. That sort of just came into my mind that, man, could we do that? And obviously we'd have to plan a lot of logistics, but you could bring the media in, you could really bring some attention to this issue here in our own region. Any thoughts on that, Ray? And if RTAP could play a role?
Sure. And it's not unheard of. We worked with our own Transit Riders Advisory Committee in the past to bring board members out on the buses with members of the track committee to learn from their experience, who are users of the system, some of the challenges of using transit. So we're used to bringing a group on. We can pick a route either to a large employment site or to a downtown area. There are a world of opportunities. We have a new corporate partner, or he's not a partner quite yet, but we're working on that. And that partner is going to grow because of the new facility announced in Virginia Beach. But Amazon, we've been sitting down with both OFF2 and OFF3 is what they call them, Western Branch, Chesapeake, and Suffolk. I don't know if you know, the Suffolk facility opened, they're at 1,000 employees now, and they say by the end of September, 2,000 employees. We're starting our first route out there in October. OFF2 will have, in Chesapeake, will have 1,000 employees by December. They've announced another fulfillment center in Virginia Beach near Oceana. That's a large corporate partnership that we should be developing. Maybe we ride out there, maybe not. Maybe we invest our resources in a corporate partner that's been here longer than Amazon. But Summit Point and what's going on out in Chesapeake in that burgeoning growth area, we've already started reorienting our services last year to better provide connections to the Summit Point development. The residential growth has been introduced. Has anyone ridden down Bovo Parkway every day and see what's opening every day there? So there's a mother lode of opportunity at some place like that, or something else. I'm open. We have a new corporate citizen that will be coming online in Portsmouth with the casino. There's going to be a lot of people employed there. We've already been talking with them about what shift times are and how people can get out there to work. Norfolk will have a corporate one soon enough, another casino. There's a lot that we can do with this group and put on a route.
I would also suggest riding maybe also an electric bus.
Yes, definitely.
Along
get
that as
on an
well.
Electric bus.
And Rob, I'm even thinking along the way, a lot of logistics to think about. You could almost stop at a bus stop and point out some of the things that our audit is looking at, right? Right there in terms of sidewalk connections and crosswalks. But I do think, and if we could pull some media there, it could give you all opportunity to speak to our community about, our support of transit. So thoughts, is that something, Noel, I just add another work task that we have to work on together, but what do the RTAP members think? Is that something we ought to be thinking of?
Absolutely, Rob. I think we should do it. To the experience, because I brought this up a few meetings back. I've ridden the 960 Max a couple times. I haven't ridden it since we expanded and had added more stops. But talking to my associates, I got on in Norfolk and got off at 19th Street. Now it travels further down because it actually goes into further down into the oceanfront. But the experience that you get from the actual ridership would interject so much energy into this committee and so much real world information that we see on whether it's a PowerPoint or listen from Arthur. And I want to make some comments when we get into other businesses. But there's so much that happens that we see, but at the micro level, at the ridership level is where you get the real world knowledge. Where, to Rob's case on the audits, you actually see and you experience the length of time it takes you to commute, your experience waiting for the commute, your experience waiting for the commute to go back home, and challenges along the route. So that's invaluable information. I'm 100% for it.
Okay, well, let us we'll get our heads together on that, Ray, and see what we can put together. I did want to allow, and yes to our advocacy day. Okay, I did want to allow enough time for other business. I think we've always benefited from just hearing anything anybody has to add about transit related items, and I know we have one piece of information.
Thanks, Bob. So, Arthur made some good points. Mr. Amoroso, great points, and I love the idea on the base with the pilot program. It doesn't matter where the funding program. That's to getting people and to getting mobility is very important, because you forget a lot of the junior sailors coming off those ships. They have limited funds. Speech this year was supposed to start in Memorial Day. But actually started a few weeks later. I don't know if you folks have heard of Freebie, right? Wildly successful, and that is in essence a public-private venture. So the hotel industry, we self-tax, right? So, and we talked about earlier the TOT. That's not a very good subject to bring up around hoteliers, but the mobility of Freebie, once that's done to the ocean front, the reason for doing that is to, first of all, it's economically friendly, and also in an ecosystem, it's electrified, right? So it's all Teslas. They actually have 6 vehicles, 5 that are for the general public, and 1 is for disabled or handicapped people who for rides. It is available, just like the program on the base, it is available to anybody where that Freebie services. It doesn't matter whether you work, our associates use it, our visitors to the city use it. It is geofenced from 42nd Street out to Dam Neck and up to Bird Neck Road. I know, Megan, you have some knowledge of this program. So, but the program is wildly successful, and I think sometimes when you work with cities and municipalities, things move a little bit slower, but when you have public and private ventures, things tend to move a little bit more quickly. So it is a pilot program which will go on for a year. When we first were doing this, we were like, oh, it's only 5 or 6 vehicles. You're going to need more. They need more. So, but it's basically a 15 to 20 minute wait. So you can call this microtransit, right? So if you connect from a bus, you can, once you get into Virginia Beach, if you know where you're going to land, you can call about 15 minutes ahead. It will pick you up and drop you off within the geofenced location. So I think we're moving forward with mobility on a private-public partnership a lot quicker than a lot of these programs are moving. So I sit on a few committees in Virginia Beach. So I see this program being expanded and growing. We are the first city outside of the state of Florida, which originates from, that have taken on this program. But it's all about moving people around. And when you say low cost or no cost, Ms. Ramos, there's always a cost. Somebody is paying for it. So, correct? So through self-tax and being good stewards of the community, wanting to move people around, it reduces traffic. It's eco-friendly. And it's free to whoever uses it. So it's a win-win. I just thought if you didn't know about Freebie, I don't work with Freebie. I don't get any kickbacks. So, but it's a great program just to help the citizens or in that general location be more mobile. And you'd be surprised as how many I have dishwashers, stewards, housekeepers that live and work within the community that take this program, and it's changed their quality of life immensely. Just thought I'd mention that. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
To
It's
tack on real-
exciting and maybe transferable to some of our other urban locations in an exciting way.
To tack on a little bit at the
I'm sorry.
end, the current ridership numbers as of the beginning of this meeting was 11,957 rides since it started on June 17th. Average wait time is between 20 and 30 minutes. It's also app-based, which is the majority of the downloads, but you also have the option to hail on the side of the road or call, as was mentioned before. But if anybody is curious about more specific details, I can definitely shoot you an email with that.
And to those numbers, Mr. Amorosos, I think the ridership that you'll get is going to be more than 4 to 6, because when you provide a service at that, it's at either low cost or no cost. I think your numbers are very, in my opinion, are very conservative. I think you'll have a better ridership.
Was going to bring up the freebie as well. The Atlantic Avenue businesses are thrilled with it. They've had the trolley for years that kind of makes the cycle. People aren't using the trolley. They love the freebie and having the ability to call it, and it's basically a free Uber ride. So the businesses are thrilled.
Also, what it's done is because you mentioned come down to Norfolk for scooters or Lime and Bird and all that. That is also an alternative to give people more mobility and without having it's if you go to different municipalities, Revel, Lyft, Zipcar, they're all great in the localities that they're in and they fit those localities. Those don't fit our localities because of, at the oceanfront because of the amount of traffic. So, but it's good to have different kinds of mobility.
I wonder if it might be possible for a future agenda if our Virginia Beach reps could help us with maybe bringing an overview and the business model of how that's supported for our other cities to learn from and maybe explore opportunities. Because it was so impressive. My wife and I were driving down at the ocean front, and to see these vehicles was really exciting. It really was.
Yeah, definitely can be another agenda item. And they are pretty cool. They're the Teslas with the Falcon doors. So it definitely kind of hits that retro 80s, 90s vibe that everybody's about now. So,
So Bob,
What did you call that, Ray? The new
fad.
the
The new
fad?
cool thing.
The new cool thing.
So Bob, we've had the Fred free ride every day in Norfolk for years. It's also an electric vehicle. It's not a Model X, so it's not as cool for sure. But we've been operating that, and I think because it's a Model X, I think part of that is I drive a Model X. It's cool. I understand, but it is something, and I don't know when we compare and contrast. And actually, my item, which is along these lines, has this organization had a presentation from Traffics previously? Because Traffics has some elements of these that's already there, and I think it would be helpful for this organization to understand what it provides.
Yeah, so we have at the TPO level, but not at the RTAP level, and that's certainly something we could.
May I make a suggestion? Coupling with Virginia Beach, maybe it's a demand responsive day. Amy's managing the microtransit pilots in Newport News and Virginia Beach. She can share the results such as it is at the point of time of the next meeting of how those two pilot programs are running on microtransit. And maybe it'll be a demand responsive type of day.
Yeah,
in
that's a
Virginia
great,
Beach.
that's a great idea, Ray, and we can learn about these other, other approaches. Yeah, innovative. That's fantastic idea. Okay. Any other items to share? Yes.
I
Brad.
know we're running late. My wife and I just deposited our son up at JMU 2 weeks ago for his freshman year. And I know I'm telling everybody in this room something you already know, but I've done that trip through Richmond, up 64 and on to Harrisonburg more times in the last 6 weeks than I have in the prior 2 years or so. And it is a remarkable thing to have that roadway completed. And that last dozen miles before Richmond is surprisingly painful when you get back down to two lanes. But what a great success story for our region and the original funding sources of that. It is a remarkable thing. I'm not a traditional traveler of that route a lot of times, but now I am. And it is a wonderful, wonderful amenity for our region and a success story for our regional collaboration.
Thank you. And I say this every meeting I can, and please, if you see Delegate Barry Knight, thank him, because through his leadership, we're not done, right? The General Assembly did allocate $450 million over the 2-year period of general fund money to continue filling that gap. We have another federal application that's pending. Now Richmond's offered in another 100 million. If that grant's approved, we're up to 700 million to finish that gap. So yeah, it is exciting, but hopefully we can get the job done too. Any other information?
I have
Yes.
one more announcement. There is a ribbon cutting at the Newport News Transfer Center. We've done some significant enhancements there. It's on September 13th at 1:30 in the afternoon. I hope anyone's welcome to come. I believe you sent the invitation out.
I did. Yeah, it would be great to see a strong RTAP turnout that day. So I got to get everybody T-shirts or something, right?
We're having popcorn, if that'll lure anybody.
All right. Okay, Mayor Glover, Ms. McClellan, anything you wanted to close with? Very good.
I've used my word allotment already.
So in all seriousness, every meeting you inspire me. I mean, this group is great, and it's just been ongoing and consistent. And thank you for everything you're doing. We look forward to our next meeting. Take care, everybody, and thanks for all you're doing.